Welcome, everyone. I'm Dick Deming. I'm Medical Director of Mercy One Cancer Center and the founder of Above and Beyond Cancer. Welcome to our weekly cancer education series. It's brought to you in part by a grant from the Iowa Oncology Society. And our topic tonight is medical cannabis. And our guest is Lucas Nelson. He's the group president at Bud and Mary's. Welcome, Lucas.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So, group president of Bud and Mary's. What is Bud and Mary's?
Yes. So Bud and Mary's is a family-owned cannabis operator located right here in Des Moines, Iowa. This is where we were founded, where we are based. We've now stretched across Colorado, Iowa, and Michigan. But again, I'd really hammer that point home is that we're a family-owned company that is really dedicated to making sure that the cannabis industry has some good operators in it.
Yeah. So let's learn a little bit about you. You and I have met before, but tell us a little bit about you. You grew up where?
Yeah, so I grew up in southern Indiana, although back here in 2017. So been an Iowan for a while here.
So what was your college major?
Yeah, so I was an accounting major as a college student at James Madison University, and then I actually went directly to law school as well.
Right. And James Madison is in the DC area.
Yeah,
it's
Virginia. Exactly.
Right?
Yep, it's in Virginia, about an hour outside or so.
Yeah.
And then Indiana for law school, and then have wound my way somehow into cannabis here over the last 6 years.
Yeah. So Iowa is every state that I think there's about 40 states, aren't there, that have some form of legal cannabis, whether it is recreation, medical, or other uses. Let's talk a little bit about Iowa's journey into medical cannabis. So refresh my memory. What year was that the legislature passed the law to set up this process of having medical cannabis available?
Yeah, so that's all the way back in 2017 now. And as it passed then, there were 2 manufacturers that were allowed, 5 dispensaries that were allowed, still the case today. So it hasn't developed more licenses than that. Pretty limited product selection that has grown over the course of time. But yeah, I mean, we're here almost 6 years in from when dispensaries opened in 2018 after that law was passed.
Right. And maybe let's just describe the process by which individuals in Iowa can get medical cannabis through Bud and Mary's. So as a physician, I know that there's a form that a physician can fill out that indicates to the state of Iowa that the patient has a medical condition that the state of Iowa has determined is a medical condition that is criteria for which a patient can get into the Iowa medical cannabis.
Yeah.
It's a pretty easy form to
is.
fill out. And as an oncologist, there are 3 indications related to cancer. So cancer pain, cancer weight loss, and cancer.
The other one is nausea for cancer.
That's right. So those are the 3. But there are a number of other medical conditions. Maybe share with us what the other medical conditions are that the state of Iowa determines are justification for getting medical cannabis.
You know, the one we see the most often that captures the largest group of our patients is chronic pain. And that really can cover lots of different things, again, up to the provider and the patient, like you indicated. We see things that are mental, that are physical pain in nature, some things that have been, very acute type injury situations, or maybe something that is a condition that's been chronic for a long period of time for a particular individual. That chronic pain really does serve a lot of different categories. But then, we've got other things listed. PTSD is one of those. Seizure conditions is one. HIV is another. So we see a couple other, but like I said, most of them are in that chronic pain category.
How about other neurologic conditions? Are there neurologic conditions specifically specified?
Yeah, so MS is specifically called out in the law. I think it's other seizure conditions is how it's framed. So typically we'll see folks that, might be suffering from any sort of epilepsy and those types of things. But I'll say even as time has gone on, we've seen providers, maybe not parse all of that out necessarily and really go back to that chronic pain one and certify people under that. And, when most patients will come to us for the first time, we'll walk through a consultation with them to understand, hey, you might be certified for chronic pain, but let's talk about what that actually is. Let's get some understanding of what you're dealing with, what the symptoms are, so that we can be a little more, hopefully targeted in our approach.
So back to the enrollment process. So a patient needs to have a physician certify that they have a condition that the state of Iowa deems appropriate for getting medical cannabis. And then the patient takes that form, which they have filled out. The doctor verifies they have a medical condition, and then takes it to the state of Iowa to get a card that allows them to actually go get the product.
Yeah, and even that has recently been updated. So the state has tried to make it very online based, which is really pretty nice. You can do all of this online, so you can upload your form, your docs form. You have a separate form as a patient to fill out. It's very similar. It just obviously doesn't have the doctor requirement there. And so you upload those, take a picture of your photo ID. And then from there, you actually the state no longer issues cards. We've got an electronic system where we can look you up by driver's license number. We can look you up by other types of government issued IDs that people might have, which makes it really nice. You don't have to remember to bring that in. We can look you up right there. Easy for us to do on site, all tied in real time. So, we'll have folks that get their notice that they've been accepted, that they filled out all the paperwork correctly, done the upload, paid the fee for it to the state, and then can show up in the dispensary. I mean, you could be sitting in the parking lot for potentially once you get that notice, and within minutes it's updated in our system and you're good to come in.
So maybe even, I think I'm hearing you say within a day of the doctor signing the forms, if the patient uploads it right then and there, it's no longer a waiting period to get in the mail a card.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, a much more streamlined process. And we've even over the course of time have added some other providers that can certify. So MDs, DOs, podiatrists are in there, ARNPs, PAs. All of those folks are eligible to certify any of those conditions too.
Right. And then the fee, is it $100?
It's $100 unless you qualify for the lower fee, which is $25. And so those are things like, showing that you're enrolled in Medicaid, a couple of the state assistance programs. We've got now lowered fees for vets. So there's some things like that the state has done. And, we're about half and half. I think about half of the patients right now are pay at that $100 mark, which is an annual fee to the state to administer the program. And then we've got a group of folks that are in that $25 range.
Right. And the number of places where you actually sell the product are limited by the state, correct?
It is.
And there are only 5 in the entire state.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest drawbacks and one of the biggest challenges for Iowa if we're going to continue to have a good program moving forward, is that we've only got 5 locations across the state mandated by statute. So we'd have to see an actual law change for that to change. We've worked on that over the years. I actually thought we might be close this year, but didn't make it out of session. So we'll be revisiting that again for, I think, the 3rd year in a row now. Okay. But it's definitely a limitation to this program.
And by statute, did they say which the locations it would be?
They didn't. It just needed to be up to 5. And so those locations right now are Sioux City and Council Bluffs on the west side of the state. We operate the location in Sioux City. Of course, we've got one here in Des Moines over in Windsor Heights. And then on the east side of the state, we've got Waterloo and we've got Iowa City. And so those are the 5 locations, 2 operated by Bud and Mary's, and then 3 are operated by the other operator in the state. So they operate all 3 of those.
Right. And let's talk a bit about the science of what medical cannabis is and how it is beneficial in treating some symptoms. So I would say, as a cancer doctor, what I tell my patients is that there's firm evidence on using the various cannabis products, and we'll talk about that, THC and CBD, and in managing symptoms. And it could be either symptoms of the cancer or it could be side effects of cancer treatment. to date, I would say that I haven't seen satisfactory data that satisfies me that the products actually help in killing cancer cells or improving the outcome in terms of the actual cancer diagnosis. But I think of it more as quality of life.
100%. That is exactly how we speak about it with our patients or people interested in joining. We're not here, and this is not a product that is going to solve your underlying condition, but hopefully we can help manage pain, make your life a little easier, make you be able to maybe get back on your feet or sleep through the night. That's one of the most common situations that we face, is that we've got a lot of folks that are dealing with, whatever many conditions, and they have a hard time getting to sleep, getting a good night's rest. And I mean, conditions or not, not having a good night's rest can impact you the next day and far beyond that. And so we see a lot of folks that this really can help them get a good night's rest, stay asleep, not wake up just in such incredible pain like maybe they had been before. So that's one of the most popular kind of uses and some of the feedback we get. I will tell you, one of the interesting things about our company that we're really dedicated to, we've got the first research license available in the state of Colorado, in our Colorado operation from the state. And then we also have our DEA Schedule 1 license as well, which allows us to conduct research. One of the places we've focused it on is neuroinflammation in the brain. And I guess I'd say our hypothesis at this point is that with a disease like Alzheimer's or some of those other dementia type conditions, there is at least some initial evidence that this might be able to not necessarily reverse, but maybe at least slow down the proliferation in your brain of those diseases. So we're very, very, very early on that journey, but it is something that our company is committed to.
So we'll talk a little bit more about research. Let's do some terminology. So, we've got the term marijuana, cannabis. We're going to get into talk about THC, CBD, and then let's also throw hemp into this conversation as we try to define terms.
Yeah.
So, what's the difference between saying cannabis and saying marijuana?
Yeah, cannabis is related to the actual plant's name.
Genus or species?
Yeah, so it's so the one that everyone is familiar with, Cannabis sativa L, I think, if I'm remembering myself correctly, because even we don't call it, properly around our place all the time.
But cannabis is the genus name of the plant.
Of the plant, correct. And then hemp is this legal framework, really. What hemp is defined as in the United States is cannabis plants that have a certain level of THC. And in the United States, that's no more than 0.3% THC on a dry weight basis. So technically speaking, every plant that we grow in our facility starts out qualified as hemp because it doesn't have that THC limit there. THC in the plant develops over the course of time. Now, of course, all of our plants exceed that limit as they start growing, which is what,
you breed plants specifically to have a higher level of THC and CBD?
So we actually don't do any breeding across any of our operations right now. About a year, maybe 2 years ago, the DEA came out and said that cannabis seeds are legal to ship across state lines. And so once that was established, it's actually there are lots of breeders out there, and it's easy for us to kind of acquire those seeds, pop those in our facilities. Then we, of course, do some selection along the way and make sure. But no, I mean, the plant naturally, except for these hemp varieties that have been bred to have these low THC amounts, most of the cannabis plants out there are going to exceed that 0.3% THC level.
Okay. And is it true to say that the two physiologically active ingredients are CBD and THC, or are there a number of different ones that are also biologically or physiologically active?
Yeah, so the plant contains a number of cannabinoids, THC, CBD, probably the two most popular. But there's some others out there. There's, a molecule called THCV. There's CBG, CBC, all of, abbreviations for the full proper name. But all of those cannabinoids exist in the plant. We've got the most data on THC and CBD for what they can do. The rest of them, we have, I would say, a lot less. There's some research that was suggestive, I'd say at best, that THCV could help with weight loss. That really has never been developed any further than that. So there's at least a little bit of thought out there that some of those can do a lot more than what we know today. I'm hoping that, in light of the news yesterday on rescheduling, we will start to see research on some of those other cannabinoids, because I do think this plant has a lot more potential probably than we give it credit for right now, but it hasn't been able to be researched for 50, 60, 70 years here.
Right. And we are going to talk more about that. Let me stick with the science and the plant. So the THC and the CBD. When you make a product that is going to be for sale at Bud and Mary's, do you limit the products that you sell to just CBD and THC? Or what about all those other molecules that you mentioned? Are they going to be in the product? Do you save them, and are you thinking of what you're going to do with them? Do they what do you do with the potentially active molecules that you're not sure are they in the product that we buy, or you save them in a storage area?
Save it for a rainy day
until you figure out what to do with them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in Iowa, all the products are required to be extracted. And so what that means is that as we go through our process, we do have an ability to pick and choose to some extent what ends up in these products. And we do so intentionally. So with most of our products, you're talking about a highly purified, mostly THC type of product. We do have several that have different amounts of CBD in them. And those are targeted for specific reasons as well. Namely to address, for instance, a higher CBD product that could address a seizure condition. But then in some of ours, and we can test for this and showcase this, through the third-party testing that we have to do in this state, we do add those specific molecules into some of ours. One of them that is probably maybe the third most common one that people are used to seeing is a molecule called CBN. And it has some properties that seem to help with falling asleep, staying asleep. And so we've got a product that we kind of have the approach with, hey, if you know that sleep is an issue for you, this might be something for you to try. And we've got a little CBN added to it. Still has the THC, CBD, but it's also had some of the CBN there. It's nice because in our facility, we invest in an HPLC, but a piece of scientific equipment that allows us to identify all of those molecules. So we can actually go on the label, and a patient can go on the label and see, oh, okay, this is going to have, X amount of milligrams of CBN in that product. And our folks would instruct that is likely to result in some more sleepiness. Now, if you're someone who needs this during the day, that might not be the best product for you, right? So we try to have those options available. Again, we're upfront with, we don't have all of the same body of evidence that we do for THC and CBD for what they can do. But by the same token, we want to make sure that those are available for our patients, nonetheless, for those types of uses.
So back to your growing facility. So I've been to your growing facility here in Des Moines. Now, the way the federal laws are, is it necessary for you to grow the product in the state that you're selling it? So
it is.
Yeah. And so you also have a growing area in Colorado, but that's for selling product in Colorado.
Correct.
So the greenhouses here in Des Moines, I mean, it is kind of like if you go to Pioneer Hybrid and you're looking at what they're doing with corn and soybeans and everything else. It's a very controlled environment.
Yes.
and very scientific, and the extraction process is the highest levels of science.
That is what we
So
strive
much,
for.
yeah, so much different than somebody who might think about a patch growing in the wild and just cutting the leaves and grinding them up to be smoked. This
Right.
is just night and day different from that.
It really is. We are very committed to having consistent products, and we won't be able to say that our products are quality unless they have that consistency, right? That it's going to deliver the same impact, the same effect, that same dose time and time again. Again, we're dealing with people that have some conditions that they're trying to treat, so we want to be consistent there. The way we do that is control every bit of the environment that these plants are grown in. That allows us to make sure we don't have to spray pesticides and things like that, that if you were growing outdoors is naturally going to be part of protecting against bugs and whatnot. But we don't have that in the indoor controlled atmospheres that we have. Same thing with why we have such precision on our extraction and purification techniques. Is because we want to make sure that each time we can get a highly purified product that doesn't have anything left over that we don't, want in there that could potentially injure a patient. These plants are what we call bioaccumulators. So they'll accumulate lots of things that are given to them, whether that's through water, it's through the nutrient regimen, or if it's pesticides that are sprayed on there. And no one has to take our word for it. All of this is tested by a third party to just make sure that we're not, doing any of this type of thing. But you have seen out there in our industry in some other states, fortunately, again, third party laboratories are usually catching it. But people do take some risks with what they'll spray onto plants or other solvents they'll use during extraction. And that is not a way to make this industry deal with all the stigma it already has to deal with. So that's one of the things that's kind of the core of our business. And leading with that science, hopefully as much as we possibly can, is, the only way that I think we're going to be able to continue to keep trust of people who want to come to our shop.
So very high quality, limited places you can sell it. So let's talk a little bit about what are the THC and CBD products that are derived from hemp. Why do we have, this law that is, only 5 places you could buy this, but then everywhere you turn, there are places that are selling THC and CBD. How is that
How is
legal?
that happening? Yeah. So back in 18, the United States Congress passed its Farm Bill, which it has to do every 5 years. And in doing so, it legalized the production across the country of hemp. So again, low THC plants. Unfortunately, what they didn't do in that law, or maybe what they didn't foresee, was that law really dealt with what happens in the field for these plants that are going to be grown for things like hemp fibers, hemp seeds. And the intent, the thought was that we were going to allow further access to a molecule like CBD. It was not meant to, and I don't believe anyone who ever says it was not meant to legalize THC across the country. Especially you look at who signed who led the charge on those bills, that was not their intent. However, since it was silent to what could happen downstream after the fact, what we've seen over the course of time is that a lot of operators have said, well, as long as we adhere to this 0.3% THC limit, we're good. That's legal, even if it's in a final product. So what has developed over the last year, maybe 2 years, there are chemical processes you can subject CBD to, where it now becomes, I think we all would argue, synthetic, but it becomes THC through these chemical processes. So you're creating something that wasn't there before. Once you do so, what the further logic here is that if you think of a math equation, right, THC divided by the total weight of the product, as long as that equation, total THC divided by the weight of the product, equals 0.3% or less, then you're good. And it's a known gap in this law. We have seen this really proliferate in states that don't have comprehensive medical or adult use programs. Iowa is unfortunately one of them. And right now, the law that the state of Iowa passed in 20, I think, But just a couple of years ago that legalized hemp in this state and put some other parameters that Iowa saw as being valuable really didn't do anything more to limit what happens downstream. Now, we've seen a bill go to the governor's desk this year that will attempt to do some of that. I think the jury's out on how much that will or won't happen. And we should start to see, presuming she signs it, we should start to see some some guidance coming from Health and Human Services here that maybe will give us some more insights. But at this point, all you got to do is sign up to get I think it's $500 to get a hemp registration, and you can sell whatever you want from anywhere you want. The big risk here, in addition to this is a synthetic process to get this THC, is that the testing standards are not very rigorous in most states. And the checks and balances, for instance, the department, the Health and Human Services here, sees our C of A's, our certificates of analysis, to make sure that they are correct, that we've passed all our testing before we can actually go sell anything. That is not really feasible with the current setup across this country. So what we've seen in Iowa and in other places is that, people might get contaminated plants that then become these products. They might be getting products with other sort of solvents or other sort of chemicals in them. You're not going to get a full panel understanding of what is in there, what isn't in there. We actually bought some things over the last year to do some internal testing to just try to give ourselves an understanding of what was going on. We saw things that were mislabeled that had incorrect THC amounts. I can think of one very specific product. I think it was a 500 milligram THC, which is truly a pretty absurd amount for what this product was. But when we went to test it, there was 0 THC in the product. So, you got someone who went to a store, thought they were getting that, thought they were taking a certain dose each time they took whatever the serving size was. They were getting none.
The way the law is written, is it also required that for someone to sell a product derived from hemp, that the hemp has to be grown in Iowa to sell the product in Iowa?
It can be grown anywhere across the country.
Oh, okay.
And that's where you've got multiple people in the supply chain here that could have potentially impacted your product by the time you're, at your local gas station buying something, with no real chain to say, hey, this was safe and tested at this step, that step. That is something that is paramount inside all of these other markets, whether we're talking adult use or medical, whether we're talking Colorado or Iowa or, Florida or whatever, name your state. And so again, another big risk with the way this hemp industry has started to develop.
Yeah. Well, let's get back to thank you for explaining that, because it is confusing, especially when it first got started and you see these stores pop up. And there was a time where the law enforcement was closing down some of those, and then they proliferated, and it all has to do with the legalization of agricultural growth of hemp.
Correct.
And that's what gave them cover to then take the hemp product and go in the direction of making the medicinals, if you will. Let's go back to the reason that the medical cannabis law passed in Iowa and in probably about 39 other states is there is data, evidence in humans showing that it can have a beneficial effect on certain conditions. Maybe let's talk about some of those and share with us some of the scientific data. So you said one of the most common situations is pain.
Yeah.
We know that pain accompanies many different disease processes. And we also know that we have gone through and are still going through a huge issue with narcotics.
Yes.
Both prescription narcotics and narcotics that get into society and are misused, but even those who maybe get them legally, but because they have pain and then end up with addiction and all sorts of side effects. So let's talk about the scientific data on the use of THC CBD for pain management.
Yeah. I think two of the biggest differences we see versus those narcotics. One is that for nearly all, I won't say all, I'm sure there's an example here for some of our patients, but for nearly all of them, we really can get folks to a dose that works for them, and they don't have to step up that dose over the course of time. So, for instance, maybe it's someone taking one of our tablets that's 10 milligrams of THC. Most of our folks, you're not going to see them have to increase that over time. And I think that leads into our second point, which there is a disorder, and it seems to affect, maybe 8 to 9% is the best data we have that would really reflect almost an addiction to cannabis. So I don't want to make the statement that it's impossible to become addicted to it, but we really do not see in the data across the world, really, that is nearly the same rate that you see at some of those other harmful narcotics. The side effect profile also, I mean, what gets reported to us most common is things like dry mouth, maybe the first time or two, some dizziness. We can certainly deal with that, usually by introducing a little bit higher dose of CBD for patients that are taking THC. We don't see this massive side effect profile. And in fact, a lot of our patients that come to us who have dealt with a condition that gave them a prescription for narcotics, we see them want to wean that down because they don't have those nasty side effects. They're worried about potential addiction. They're worried about having to step that dose up over the course of time. So that kind of combination of things really has seemed to be very impactful for our patients and why they do want to continue using these products, stay in this program.
Mm-hmm.
It's not perfect for everyone, and there's lots of people who have dropped out of our program because it didn't have the impact they were looking for, or those side effects for them maybe were something that they weren't wanting to deal with. So I also don't want to send the message that it is the perfect solution for every single person, because it's not, but we typically do talk about it as being a tool in the tool belt, so to speak, for lots of different people.
And I would assume that there's not a contraindication for taking a medical cannabis product in conjunction with other forms of pain medicine.
There are a few out there, not most of the pain medications. Some of I think warfarin is one that is always on our list of, hey, if that's something you or but for the most part, no. There is not data out there that it is contraindicated with most of the other things that our patients tend to be on some sort of prescription medication, especially at the beginning of their journey with us. And really outside of a few known problems, we don't see those contraindications.
So you might have already answered this, but as someone who takes care of patients with advanced cancer pain and the need to control the pain, narcotics are very, very useful. And but the higher the dose of narcotics, the more the side effects. And the two most dominant side effects of the narcotics are sedation and constipation. And the higher the dose that a patient might requires to control the pain, the more that those are side effects. I think I heard you say that most patients get control, although I guess not to argue, but it's hard for me to imagine some of my patients in such severe pain that a 10 milligrams of your product is going to take the effect of a fentanyl patch and immediate release morphine. But is it, as you increase the dose of your product, do you get more of the negative effects? And to what extent, at what dose do you get the effects that one might associate with recreational cannabis? Hallucination might not be the right, but that's sort of a out of body type experience.
So, and to hit your first point, that dose, 10 was an example. Of course, there are some of our patients that are taking, their dose would be closer to 50 or to 60, or I know there's a couple that I've come into contact with over the years here that are at about 100 to really make sure they're managing. You get into those types of situations and there is a elevated chance that you're going to feel some of those side effects, the potential for kind of that out of mind experience, I'd say.
What term do you use to describe that
So,
side effect?
yeah, I mean, because most of our patients understand what we're doing here, it's not a medical term, but that is when we will usually say high, right? The high that you might have heard about, you might know about, you might have experienced. A lot of our folks have tried cannabis oftentimes from a recreational state, maybe from a gray market or black market type of situation at some point in their life. So for those that do have that knowledge, we'll use that term. It is not a scientific term. It's not a medical term, but that is a term we'll still use because it is kind of commonplace knowledge for, okay, I understand what that might be like. That again is a great place for us to introduce some of our higher dose CBD products, because what we see in the data is that balance of THC and CBD can kind of help bring that potential side effect down. Doesn't mean it's going to eliminate it entirely necessarily, especially as you get up to those higher doses. But that's one of the most common ways that we'll ask our patients to say, hey, let's add a little bit of CBD into this with your higher THC dose, if that's what you're going to be needing, so we can hopefully combat some of that lightheadedness, some of that high that you can experience. Look, if you're using this recreationally, there are still some people that you get to 20 milligrams, you get to 25 milligrams, you're going to feel that, and that's what you're after. That's certainly a potential. I think the big difference, or the big differentiator we see in our patients, is if they feel that, one, a lot of them are pausing, a lot of them are coming back to us and saying, this is not what was supposed to happen, or we got to deal with this. And that gives us that ability to maybe change that dose a little bit, right? Suggest that they take that THC down, suggest that they increase that CBD amount. It is one of the biggest challenges with our industry and with this in this medical space, that we still don't have a real, surefire way to say, I can look at you and know you have this condition and this is going to be the dose. Get to this, don't go anymore, and you'll be good. So typically we'll see our patients and we'll instruct them to start out pretty low. I mean, 2.5, 5 milligrams of THC, and potentially build there until we get to the dose that actually is therapeutic for them. But yeah, it can be a little bit of a challenge at the beginning.
Right. Let's go back to the process again. So we talked through at the beginning the process of the patient filling out the application, having a physician or a nurse practitioner or provider verify that they do have the medical condition that the state of Iowa lists as a justification for getting. They get put on the list, and then they show up at Bud and Mary's. So they walk into Bud and Mary's, and you are able to access a database that verifies, they show you their driver's license, that they are on the database to be able to get it. So as a doctor, I do not prescribe medical cannabis. I just verify the patient has the condition. Who prescribes what product they're going to get? What's the background of that person?
Yeah.
I assume the patient doesn't show up with their electronic medical records or even a paper chart. So you probably, correct me if I'm wrong, are relying on the patient to give you their history.
Yeah.
And so who's the person they interact with at Bud and Mary's in Windsor Heights?
Yeah. So, if this is your first time in, you're going to be offered the opportunity to sit with one of our patient consultants and chat with them. You're right. We don't have access to electronic medical records. We are reliant upon the person being able to either bring those documents with them or to be able to accurately summarize them. We do have an intake form that we use to help make sure that we capture that info as best we can if they're willing to share, and that they can help us guide with, hey, this is what I've been dealing with. This is what I'm trying to treat as a symptom. One of the drawbacks of this being, it's not done, but still being on Schedule 1, is that we do have some of those limitations. And so it is kind of a known defect within these medical programs. So anyway, at our stores, you'll be talking with a patient consultant who would guide you through, all right, I've read your intake form, understand what you're trying to deal with, talk to me a little bit more about these symptoms. And then we would be making what is technically a recommendation for the patient. I would say our recommendations are almost always accepted, but under the framework of the way this state and every other state is set up, the patient has the ultimate right to purchase whatever it is they want. Now, we also have the right to refuse that if for some reason we thought, someone was abusing it or someone was doing something inappropriate. The situation hasn't come up very often, but that does exist in our program. Folks on our staff, we are required to have either a pharmacy or a farm tech, someone that has actively licensed, I guess is the right word, but actively has those certifications, that licensure. And so we actually have one in each of our locations in order to make sure we meet that qualification. Those folks help us with the education that we distribute to the whole staff. We've got our scientific teams really across the company. A lot of it is centralized out in our Colorado location, as I mentioned, with the research being focused out there. And so all of our staff is trained on, hey, here's how these molecules are going to work. Here's how you might, approach a recommendation to a patient. And so you'll have that interaction, take it to the point of sale system. Again, it is up to the patient ultimately, but pretty much everyone will take our recommendation. And then we'll also, so not only product type, but also, hey, here's how I would suggest using this. Here's when we'd even suggest. We suggest for most people that, the first time you're taking this, if you haven't used THC before, do it in the evening perhaps, or do it when you're home, when you're in a comfortable environment. Try to make it as safe as we possibly can. Makes it sound like it's dangerous, but for folks that maybe don't have that experience before, I think that's an important piece of advice we'll certainly hand out as well.
So back at the store, as they're deciding on the product, what are the various forms of the product and method of delivery of the products? I mean, are we talking about capsules, liquids, combustibles, vaping? What are the various methods of delivery of the medication?
So Iowa prescribes all of these in either statute or rule. So in this state, we're allowed, and we do offer tablets, tinctures. So, an oil dropper, essentially, the people can consume orally. We have a cream product as well. A topical. It does not, it's not transdermal. So very targeted for certain types of conditions. It is not going to work for everything. Then we've got vaporized, or what I would categorize, I guess, generally as inhalable type products. So those come in vaporized form only. Smoking and therefore combustion is not allowed in this state. It's specifically called out as a prohibition. Don't see that changing at any point in time here soon. One of the big fights we have been arguing for and pushing for is access to a flower-based product that would be vaporized. A subtle distinction, but in a very important one, because there's data out there that shows the difference between combusting, which does release some harmful toxins, and vaporization, which is done at a lower temperature, and you don't see that harmful release of those chemicals. That's important, and an important product, one, because of cost, and because.
But did you say you're actually taking the flower of the plant?
Correct.
So you haven't extracted it.
Correct.
So
And that isn't allowed here at this point in time. We're one of the few states that doesn't have that type of product.
So back to the ones that are allowed. I heard you say tablets.
Yep.
Liquids that you do orally.
Yep.
A cream that you apply topically, but it's not for systemic absorption. It's
Correct.
just I got this joint hurts and I'm going to put it
almost
there.
Exactly how we usually describe it at a high level. If you can point to it, that might work.
And then vape.
And then vaporization.
And do all 4 of those routes of administration, tablet, oral, liquid, on topical, and then the vaping, do they come in the various percentages of THC and CBD?
They do, yeah. So we vary all of those. We have some that are higher in THC, some that are lower in THC and higher in CBD. We've got some that are ratioed. So for instance, our Harmony tablets are 1-to-1. You're going to get identical amount of THC and CBD. And then we've got some that are going to be much higher doses, typically of THC, again, to double back to the hemp program for a second. Despite the problems on the hemp-derived THC side, CBD, 100% totally legal. And what we've seen is a lot more operators taking that side seriously. I think there's probably some good reasons for that, but that fact remains. And so, a lot of folks have access to CBD and all sorts of different varieties out there, even more than we're allowed to do in the state of Iowa. So when you hear me talk about, when we have those higher doses, it's typically on that THC side, because that's the one that can be, more inaccessible unless you're going through one of these state-run programs. So anyway, we do have that entire range of different amounts. And then even when you think about, you can, we've got our tablets quartered so that you can easily cut those. If you need a smaller dose, we can get down to the 0.5 milligram on our oil, on our tincture dropper. And then inhalation, through vaporization, we have done basically a general attempt at saying, hey, most people, when they inhale, they're going to get this amount of active, they're going to get this amount of milligrams. But that one is a little bit more, a little harder, because it does require you to inhale, and that can be a little different.
And there's potentially more side effects that could happen. I mean, we're certainly aware of various lung conditions that might be related to vaping.
Yes.
Anything. I mean,
correct.
Because you're not just vaping your THC.
Correct.
It's got to be in a solvent or.
So what we mix it with is terpenes, which are a natural compound in the plant. But to be totally fair, there is not an extensive history and body of research on inhaling those. And you've seen some states, Iowa hasn't specifically done this, but we've taken the initiative to do so anyway. But there are some known substances that a lot of these recreational or medical states have banned. I mean, one of the ones that caused all the problems in 2019 was vitamin E acetate. Never something we put in our product, never something we would.
It was kind of the popcorn lung thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm looking at the time. I want to make sure I leave plenty of time for questions. Let's just, you touched on it, but just yesterday or the day before, the Biden administration announced that they're going to make a regulatory change, or it was the FDA or DEA, to change the classification of cannabis from a Scheduled 1 controlled substance, which is in a category of no medical benefit and really limits the ability to even do medical research. And other substances in that category are heroin and LSD. And it's going to move it to a 3 category, which would include things like oxycodone, so something that is we know as a medical benefit, still a controlled substance. But that would allow now for more centers to do clinical research to actually look at what are the risks, benefits, efficacy, safety around this product.
Yeah, it was a really exciting day for us. There's some boring tax consequences that are going to be in our favor across the industry that hopefully result in some lower prices for patients, but that stuff's boring. The research side of things, I mean, I think it'll open a channel for more research generally to be done on these molecules, but 2, I think we still need some, clarification as this happens from the FDA. But this should open a more clear path for FDA-approved cannabis products. First time, obviously, in history, we'll have those that could contain THC. There is an FDA-approved Schedule 5, I believe, CBD-only product called Epidiolex that got its approval 4 or so, maybe years ago, 5. But I really do think this will be the first real chance to do some research, have a better body of evidence originating from this country on what these molecules can and can't do, and potentially, have them on shelves to be prescribed by a physician, available at a pharmacy, just like you see with some of those other Schedule III drugs. So again, for a company like ours too, that has that mindset of we are interested in that path, it was a monumental day. There were lots of smiles and, high fives, and hey, this is a huge moment in cannabis history here.
Okay. Let's open it up for questions. So we have a live studio audience. We'll start with them. And if you are watching us live streaming right now, please put your questions in the comments section and we'll get to them. So we'll start with Sherry.
Hi.
Hey.
So on the CBD oil, I've bought several different kinds over the years, and I found one that did work in another state. But anyway, when you're looking at the packaging, is there anything on there that could identify if it's a quality product, or they usually don't list all the ingredients? Is there any way to see by the packaging?
So if someone were buying a product not from Bud and Mary's, what are guidance you might give them?
Yeah. So if you're buying in a different state from a state's legal market, so presuming in another state, you're likely buying on the adult use side, which you can still find those CBD based products there. Not the end all be all, but that's a good indication that it has gone through appropriate testing by a third party that's also been certified by that particular state. And so that would give me a lot of confidence. I mean, I would be happy to tell my family, friends, et cetera, that look, go into another state's program, go into a dispensary in Colorado. You should feel confident that what is on that label is going to be true. What that, the active dose in there is going to be true. And there's not going to be anything that's on the banned substances list, which each state has inside these programs. If that's not the case, most of these companies now that are at least trying to do things correct will make their certificate of analysis available, typically through a QR code on the packaging. If you're holding a box or a bag or whatever, you don't see any way to access that company's certificate of analysis to pull up, on your phone or whatever it might be, look through and see that it passed testing, that what is on the label matches what the laboratory should have tested for, to say, I said there's 100 milligrams in here, there actually are. That would be a huge red flag if you couldn't easily access that information. I would, again, if it was my friend's family, I would probably say, look, if you can't find that info very easily, very quickly, and you can't decipher it, I wouldn't buy something like that. This is one of the challenges with this space, to be honest. So if you're in another state and you've got access to a licensed dispensary, especially again on that adult use side, that's what I'd suggest. And again, if you can't find certificate of analysis results, I'd say run the other direction.
Okay.
Other question?
One other question.
Okay, we'll let you have one more.
Now I almost forgot what it was. So the products, it appears they relax you. I'm guessing that maybe my mind wouldn't be as sharp or as quick. I would be in a more relaxed form. So are there anything, like if you want to use it when you're at work to not have the pain, what type of product would that be so you're more alert?
Yeah, so if you're wanting to use these products during the day, you're wanting to use them during work, again, I'd probably end up directing you if I was there, right? And of course, we have our actual staff who's much better positioned than me. But what they're typically going to end up recommending is something that's going to have that CBD in it, going to be a little bit lower THC limit to those products. Again, I'll dial back to that Harmony one. We've got, I know some specific people in my life that take that regularly during the day and do not have an impact such that they can't focus at work or that they can't focus on their tasks during the day. Is that going to be the case for every single person out there? Maybe not. But that is why, again, we have those different dose amounts of those different molecules to try to be able to pair those things together. So if I was suggesting you something, it'd probably be something that had some of that CBD in it to help balance out, something that's going to be likely in that 1-to-1 ratio of THC and CBD. But as maybe a general statement for everyone that's watching, there is absolutely a path for lots of our patients that they can continue on with their day, get some of that pain relief, but not have any of those impacts where maybe they couldn't focus at work or whatever else it may be.
Okay. Next question.
Yes. There are 5 distributors, you say. What's your clientele? I mean, how many people have been qualified by the state to purchase your products?
So right now, I think as of last month, it was about 17,000 patients that have active cards in the state. So that's statewide. We are typically seeing maybe around 200 to 250 people a day, and sometimes that's repeat customers.
And that's in your two
our two
stores.
Yep.
So Sioux City and Windsor Heights.
Yep. A lot of the patients in the state are focused around those 5 dispensaries because driving for it can be a big challenge for people. But yeah, we're it's about, I think I just saw the math we did internally. It's about 0.6% of the population in Iowa. So it's a pretty small portion.
Yes, you're starting to touch upon this, but what is your clientele, like their age ranges, being an adult? Do you see more younger adults, older adults, or middle adults coming to you for help?
Sure. So we have served everyone from the age of 2 up to, I think our oldest is 102. Yeah, so quite a range. We didn't mention, but there is a path for minors to get in the program. They do have to have a designated caregiver, as our program calls it, but there is a path for minors to get into the program. Our average age right now, I think, is just a shade under 50 years old, almost dead split. I think we're 51%, maybe it's 52% female, and obviously the other half male. And that has really stayed consistent throughout the course of the program's history. I think our average age started at late 50s, and so it has shifted down, a little bit. But yeah, our average person coming in the door is, around a 50-year-old female at this point in the program.
Lucas, do you have, off the top of your head, what percentage of your patients have cancer as their indication?
I want to say that are actually categorized as cancer. It is the 3rd most common we see. And that percentage is probably in the 8 to 10, if memory serves. Give me a percentage or 2 on each end of that.
So number 1 is chronic pain, probably.
Number
and
2, PTSD.
Number 2, PTSD.
Yep.
Okay. And then cancer and seizures.
Seizures down lower, MS down lower, and then you get into some of the other ones that are on there that are, 1% or even a little bit less than that.
Okay. George, you get the last question.
Yeah, before we run out of time. And it's kind of along the lines of what you're talking about. Because of the process that people have to go through to get to you, are you seeing an inordinate number of very ill people that you can only help somewhat, whereas people that might be lesser ill that you could help a lot, for instance, you don't get to see because they're not going through that process? The people that do that are very ill.
Yeah. When the program started, it was very ill folks that were coming to us, kind of on the last leg, or maybe, traditional practices had only gotten them so far. Honestly, share a strange maybe anecdote that kind of kicked it. As we expanded, we ended up changing our name to Bud and Mary's. We used to be Med Farm Iowa. It's actually an ode to my grandparents. My grandfather went by Bud, or still does, but still is alive, but has gone by Bud his whole life. My grandmother's name is Mary, so it's a cool way to get to honor them. But when we made that change, we started seeing the shift of, oh, I thought the medical program in Med Farm Iowa that sounds so almost pharmaceutical that's not for me. I'm dealing with some things, but I'm not at the very, very end of my life, and I think it's an interesting connection to some of the above and beyond mindset of, hey, yes, you might be dealing with something, but this shouldn't be the end of your life or anything like that. We want to empower people. We want to help people feel better and be able to do some other things. As the name changed, we started to see a lot more people that were, hey, I've got a condition, I'm dealing with some pain or something else, but I'm not giving up on life or anything like that. And so that shift, it started maybe in the last year and a half or so, where we've seen people kind of across a spectrum of very serious, still definitely some of our population of patients, but also people who are just dealing with some things that maybe they don't want to go down the narcotics path, or they started and stopped and want another potential solution. So really, I mean, this program, again, if you've got one of those conditions or you're dealing with any of them, it could be an option for you. And we certainly encourage people to come in or give us a call and talk very directly about what they're dealing with. That might help better, answer your specific condition that you might have.
Well, thank you, Lucas. Lucas Nelson has been our guest tonight. He is the group president of Bud and Mary's, one of the medical cannabis manufacturers, growers, and suppliers for the medical cannabis program in Iowa. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll definitely have you back. I'm sorry we have to cut it short. There's more questions, but I hope that you'll join us again next week. If you know someone that would benefit by watching this program, it will be available on demand beginning tomorrow at the Above and Beyond Cancer YouTube channel and the Mercy Cancer Center website. I hope you'll come again next week to join us. Thanks.